Hello, everybody, and welcome to the episode number 5 of the Kibbles Podcast. If this is your first time ever joining us, welcome. My name is Tra.
And my name is Jon.
And welcome to the first podcast of 2020. Woohoo! Happy New Year to everyone, and we wish all of our listeners and your families, your loved ones, a happy New Year. May you have lots of success in your life, at work, and basically in anything you do. So Happy New Year and all the best.
It's been a decade since you've been listening to us, so...
Okay, so speaking about New Year, I think this is a time of new beginnings, right? Always that, like people say. And for some of our listeners who are fresh university graduates, this could be a bigger milestone for them because they're starting out their first job ever. Right, so this is the big thing, big step. So that's why we want to talk a little bit about this. So just for your context, both me and Jon, we have about slightly less than 4 years of experience in the workforce so far. So we are definitely not super senior people or executives at the moment, but we thought we could give you some advice and maybe share from our experience in navigating this corporate jungle in the first job especially. Yeah.
So I guess this is a good time to talk about what our first job was, where we worked at.
Sure,
so
go ahead.
For me, I worked in a finance company. I was in finance. It's a small company. There's only about 10, 15 odd people in the office, but my colleagues were quite international. There were a lot of Australians, Indians, Chinese. It's a good mix, but yeah, very international exposure for me. Yeah, what about you?
So for me, I worked in an MNC, so I'm still there. And the company is huge. It's a huge corporation, of course. And my team itself is somewhat small, a little bit like yours, like 10, 15 people. But of course, being in a corporation, you get to work with way more people. So at least like my circle consists of at least 20 to 30 people of sort. Yeah.
I guess one thing before we can jump into what we will be, what things to look out for your first career, right? I guess one thing we can take a look at is there's a bit of difference between an MNC and a smaller company.
Yes.
Yeah, this is, it may sound obvious, but I guess when you're really inside a company, then you can really kind of see the differences. So I'll assume for like MNCs, things are more structured.
Yeah.
You follow certain rules and regulations and patterns. Everything is kind of, have a rule book to follow per se. You kind of follow the, what you're supposed to do. Where do you get certain information when you need it? Whereas in a smaller company, it's more fluid. You're expected to be more flexible and perhaps put on multiple hats to do multiple roles as and when required. So that's a bit of a difference between a big company and a small company.
And I would say there is disadvantage and advantages to both those type of structure. And if you are super lucky, you get to experience both. And then you gain a lot of valuable lessons, of course. So I think which is why we want to share our perspective today. You being in not so, I would say, super small company, not like a startup kind, but medium-sized company, very international exposure versus me who is working in a bigger corporation, also very international exposure. So hopefully we can give you a little bit of nuggets of our own experience from there. Okay, so let's talk about I guess the good way to let this podcast flow is let's talk about something that we wish we could have done better or should have done in our first job. So this is the reflection time. So would you like to start first, Jon?
I guess if I could speak to myself from 2 years back, 3 years back, and give myself some advice on what I should do better. I guess number one on my list would be more outspoken. I think this is perhaps the context here is more for Asians, especially in if your company has multiple nationalities, international exposure, you really get to see the difference between how Asian culture context, how Asian people tend to behave as compared to, let's say, a Caucasian. There's really a very big difference. They tend to be more outspoken. The power distance is lesser, much lesser. So for me, my first career, I think especially in my first year, I was kind of a yes man. I do as I'm asked to do without questioning so much. Even I don't think that things are not done the right way or could have been done better.
Yeah.
But my perspective then was like, okay, this is my first job. I'm here to learn as much as I can. I'm not gonna try to stick my head too much out. I'm just gonna be doing what they are asking me to do, right? And on hindsight, what I should have done is, yes, be prepared to learn, be prepared to absorb as much as I can, but at the same time have my own opinions and thoughts on how things should be done. I think that's very important for me. When I in my second year, I tend to I realized that, and I kind of asserted myself a bit more, and I think that was helpful. I guess for Asians, there's a worry that you're coming out too strong. You're like, this
Too
guy,
aggressive.
yeah, you don't even know what you're talking about. But I think as long as you do your research, you know what you're talking about. You have prepared for it essentially, so you have an idea, you have an opinion. You can just say like, hey, what about this way? Can we do this in a certain way? Or if someone says a really bad idea, then you go like, perhaps then there's another way we can do this. How about this way? Come up with alternative suggestions. That is one main thing which I felt I could have done a lot better. What about you?
I would add to that by saying that apart from being more outspoken, I wish for my case that I could have communicated a little bit more about my achievements at work.
Which is very important.
Yeah,
very important.
Exactly. And a lot of people would think of it as bragging. I thought of it that way. I was guilty of that thinking. But I realized that ultimately it is you who did this work, right? You're not like, of course, you're not talking about the cases where you claim credit of someone else's work. But if this is a piece of work that you have put in so much effort and, passion in doing that, it would be good to highlight, to make it known to your manager, to your supervisor, whichever, so that they will be aware of your work. So from my experience, most of the time, a lot of managers are simply way too busy to notice what's going on, and they trust that you are doing your job. But I think once in a while, maybe on weekly basis, bi-weekly basis, remind them that you're doing your work. Let's say that I completed X amount of reports today, I talked to X amount of people today, this is what I've done, ABC. So I think highlighting your work and being more outspoken, like you say, about your achievements and what are you doing to contribute is very, very important, no matter how junior or senior you are in the job.
I think that's a very good point. Perhaps again, going back to our Asian culture where we kind of tend to not want to
short sell, right?
We tend to short
humble,
sell
yeah.
ourselves a little bit here. I had a previous manager when I was an intern. She mentioned this before, and she said like many of my colleagues like to complain, like they're not being recognized. They spend all their time like complaining. It's like I've done so much, but no one's seeing what I have done.
Yeah.
But the issue is they are not saying what they have done.
Right.
There's a certain expectations that people will see what you have done, and to some extent that is quite true. Like if your work is important, it should be seen as its own. But at the same time, right, you should try to seek recognition for the work that you have done. Not go to the extent that you brag about it and say like, hey, I have done so much and I am so important. Not to that extent, but just state factually. You have contributed what. What things you have done well, what things you could have done better, things like that. I think that's very important. Instead of having to, after a long time and not doing it, then all you have is this bitterness and like, why am I not being recognized?
Yeah.
Why? Then the question is, why are you not putting effort to being recognized, right? That's one very important point.
Yeah, great. So the first thing is be more outspoken, communicate always. That's very important for your first job and just in workplace in general.
Yeah.
Okay, so the second thing I would like to talk about is probably something that a lot of my senior managers and colleagues keep telling me. I'm still kind of struggling with it. It's knowing what you want.
What do you mean?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about that. So what does it mean by knowing what I want? Because I want to know many things. But I guess what they meant in this context is knowing what you want in your career. So what do you want to do in like 2-3 years time? for many of us, we might struggle with that because this is our first job, obviously, and there's no way you can tell the future by just looking at it. But as you go, I feel as you work in your role, try to look at your role and try to kind of scale it up. Imagine in 2 to 3 years' time, as you become more senior, or even as you become a manager, what skills would you be
Required to
needed?
have,
Yeah,
right?
required to have. Like, what do you need to do? What additional responsibilities you have to shoulder? So knowing that, being aware of that, and more importantly, taking action to equip yourself with that knowledge or skills, I feel is very, very important.
Okay, I think for this, right, you can kind of separate people into different camps. There is the camp that's very lucky in the sense that they out of university, or even before they're out of university, they really know what they want in their career.
Sure.
They know what they want to do. Perhaps I want to be an investment banker, so I have gone through all the required internships to get to my required role, and then I know what are my exit paths, etc., etc. So there's a group of people like that, right? And for, I think, many others, right, heading into a career, sometimes your first job is not of your choice. It's not your not your first choice, rather.
Yeah.
It's not like the most desired job that you wanted.
Exactly.
Right? And then from there, then it's important, I guess, one is to evaluate what skills are you learning from your job, right? And then, as you mentioned, what you want to be, right? Like 3 years down, 4 years down, the next step, correct? And to achieve that, what skills do you need to start to develop?
Yeah.
And whether the job now will allow you to develop those skills as well. So the truth is, some jobs may be a bit more dead end. It is the truth. You serve a specific function, and they do not need you or want you to develop more. Right? If that is the case, then perhaps, maybe acquire what you can from the job and have a view of what you want to do, and then maybe start to move and pivot away to the desired role that you want.
Yeah.
I guess that's something which myself personally is trying to do.
And just my very small addition to that would be in kind of technical side of things, right? So you could decide in your immediate role in terms of seniority. So if you imagine yourself in 2-3 years time, you get promoted, become more senior, is this the position that you want to stay in? Then you decide in terms of in your immediate company, if you're lucky enough to have a chance for transfer or moving to another team still within the same company, you could do that. Or the third one, which is the bigger decision of them all, is moving out of the company entirely and changing industry or changing the nature of the job even. So that will require a little bit more thinking on that behalf.
Yeah. And again, I think many people are not sure what they want to do. Like, what's your eventual goal in life, right? Like, what do you want to become? Do you want to be a CEO? Do you want to be a CFO? Do you want to be an accountant? Do you want to be, supply chain manager? There are many routes out there. But I guess there is always a constant need to evaluate on yourself what is your interest, what do you think you can do well in, what you want to do well in, and then try to, pivot and shift your way towards it, right?
Yep.
And I guess that brings us to our last point. Yeah, which this is actually something which I have never learned during schooling, university, or before that. And it's kind of a phrase which I realize is used a lot at work, right? This phrase is called expectation management.
Of course.
Yeah, I've never heard that in university. Have you heard that?
Never.
No.
Never.
Yeah. So this term expectation management is actually very important and very often used in the workplace.
Tell us more about it.
Okay, so as the name itself states, expectation management is about managing the expectations. I guess in some contexts, it could be towards your superiors, upwards, managing upwards. And for some who are not, at the lowest level, in your first job, there you could have, some colleagues who are underneath you, you're a leader of some group or interns, etc. Then you also be managing the expectations downwards. Right. So I guess firstly, it's for most out there for their first jobs, is learning how to manage the expectations upwards. So your manager could have been in their role for a period of time far longer than you have, for sure, right? So they have a certain expectation.
Way of doing things.
One is way of doing things, and two is expectation of how things should be done, in terms of quality,
Yeah.
in terms of timing.
Yeah.
Yeah, those kind of factors. And those might not be the same as what you can provide at that point in time. Right? They could expecting A, and you can only provide B, right? So there needs to be a bit of a bridge. So I guess for your end, it's you need to understand in your first career, what is expected. What do your managers want? And many times, it is not often
Clear.
It's not explained clearly, right?
Yeah.
So this is a very important thing to do, right? Is to ask. So what will you want? What do you need? Right?
Yes.
And could you give me an example? There will be samples of what was done previously. Is this something that you wanted me to follow?
Yeah.
Am I supposed to do something like this?
Yeah.
Right. You may think that, am I asking a stupid question? Right. Am I asking too much? Right.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I don't think so. Especially if you're not sure what is required of you, right? One thing is to, ask when do you want it? What do you need? Okay. How do I
prefer it to be done?
Maybe not how do you do it, but how do you want it to be done? Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And then having that, and then building from that. That is one very key point for me. What about you?
So I think it boils down to extremely clear communication between two parties, right? So both from the manager who must tell their subordinate, in this case you, what are their expectations, and from you must have a little bit of I would say IQ and EQ, referring back to our very first episode, to understand the manager, like to read the manager well. And understandably, for a lot of people who are just starting out on their first job, this is hard, right? Because you've never worked with a manager before and you're reporting up to someone. So my advice would be, like you said, ask very direct questions. Like you said, like how we want to be done, by when, where, so on and so forth. And also, as you progress in your work, I think there are many things that manager doesn't tell you. Like there are many unspoken things in a sense. So try to read them as much as possible, and always make sure to recap and double check. So this is something that I regretted a little bit, because I was either too scared to ask too many questions, because I was afraid I would sound stupid. That's the first mistake. Never do that. And the second thing is not, to be frank, lazy. Right? Lazy to check, lazy to double confirm with your manager. And that's a grave mistake, because if things go wrong down the line, it's on you. Right? So make sure to equip yourself with all knowledge that that can help you do your work without any hiccups. So that includes knowing your manager's expectations.
I guess the thing here is, don't assume too much. Assuming is
Exactly.
always very dangerous.
Yes.
Like you assume that they want it in a certain way. Maybe your previous internship, you did it in a different way and it worked then.
Yeah.
But at the new company, at the new place, and the new boss, does it still mean the same thing? It might not, right? It might not. So it's always good to clarify, seek examples, seek, advice. It's not a stupid question if, you could have the opportunity to do the right thing, right? Instead of wasting your own time and effort. And I guess in the workplace, you no longer have the luxury of like saying, oh, I made a mistake. Whoops, I'm just going to get a lower grade. No, work at work, right? If you made a mistake, it can be very serious. And, the opinion of your manager on you can change drastically over the first report that you have done.
Yeah, so that concludes our final point, probably. Expectation management is an art, it's a science, more like an art, I feel. But so I think just to recap this podcast episode, we talk about 3 things, right? That we wish we could have done better in our first job. One is to be more outspoken, communicate better, right? Second is knowing what you want, roughly. In terms of your career, in terms of your plans.
Having
and
thoughts
lastly,
about it and thinking about it is all very important. Yeah.
Exactly, giving it a good thought, right, as you progress in your career. And lastly will be expectation management. Knowing what to expect, reading your manager, your peers, your subordinates is very, very important.
Managing what they are expecting, is also very important. It's all
anticipating, reading between the lines, that kind of thing. And it does take experience, right? So so I think all these 3 things may sound very scary to you, but do not worry. I think having a job no matter which industry you are in, it's a very exciting milestone. You should be very proud of yourself. And just remember, anyone's career is very, very long, right? So in your first job, you'll learn a lot of valuable lessons. So those were ours. So
it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, right?
Exactly, it's a marathon, and sometimes it can be a very tiring one, but it's rewarding. Right? It's rewarding. You learn a lot of things. So yeah, that concludes our episode. We wish you a happy new year. All the best for your first job. We are rooting for you. Hopefully you go there and pass everything with flying colours. Any last advice, Jon?
On that note, pass everything with flying colours. Be prepared for failures as well. That's very important, which I think all of us should learn and be able to bounce back from, because you definitely encounter wrong things, do something wrong.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, but remember, the most important thing is to be able to bounce back and do better the next time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Never give up. Hashtag. That's it. So happy new year. See you in the next episodes of the Kibbles Podcast.
Cheers.
Goodbye.